Hey everyone, and welcome back to the next part of the video. This is after rough sanding. This is a wall that has been rough sand, and it's kind of sometimes hard to clear up what rough sanding is or where to start your rough sand. And in the other videos before rough sanding, because I have a video, prior to rough sanding where I did my first coats, I did my corner bead, I did my inside corners, I did my nail heads. And in that video, what I was attempting to do, or in these type of scenarios, what you're attempting to do is to build up the wall to a level. You're trying to just build it up in the first process. First of all, you're trying to tape it. And the taping is just to bond the wall together. When you cover it, you're hiding the tape. And now you're at the skim coat. And at the skim coat, you're trying to make that coverage look good. So it doesn't require a lot of mud. As a matter of fact, that's why I'm using the machine, because there's so much consistency of factory edges. I use the machine. But if you were to use the hand tools, you're just going to apply a thin layer of mud. Not to say that the hand tool is not effective. It's actually more effective than the machine, in my opinion. And if you know how to do it by hand, then great. But the problem with the hand tools is that your body is physically doing all the job. So again, I highly recommend to use the tools. Yes, they take a while to get used to. Yes, they are expensive, but it speeds up the job. Very, very worthwhile. Let's say that is very worthwhile for the speed that you're going to gain from using the tools most appropriately. Now, again, I'd like to remind you that this is the skim coat process. You've already done your rough sand. You've already built up all your walls. You've already gotten everything covered. You've already tied in all your loose ends. And the idea here is I'm just putting on a thin layer across everything. That is it. In this scenario, I'm using the 12-inch box. It's the same as a 10-inch box. The only difference is the mud is a bit more thinner. And speaking of mud and thinner, we're using the same mud that we used to cover the wall. It's just that in this scenario, the mud is a little bit more diluted. We've thinned the mud down. It's the exact same mud that we use for the corner beads, the same mud we use for the inside corner. All the mud is the same. What we've done with the mud, though, is just change its density. As you go through the job, as you start the job, applying the mud to the wall, the mud wants to be thicker. As you come to the end of the job, you want your mud to be thinner. And that's only for applying the mud in its mud form. Even in taping, the mud needs to be thinner. And it could be a bit thicker. I know that's the only problem of this job is what's the right thickness or thinness of the mud. That's where it comes in. But realistically, it's the same mud going all the way through the job. All purpose is a great mud for this particular purpose, for doing your job. And there's other specific mud that might give you a better result, but this still gives you a good result. The regular all-purpose mud. But, again, moving forward, you want your mud just to be thick enough to hit the wall and thin enough not to be hard to deal with. It cannot be thick. It can't be peanut butter thick. It needs to be soft ice cream thick. It needs to be a bit runny, a little bit. You know what I mean? To get through this particular stage, because as the mud is in the air, especially in the hand form, as the mud is in the air, what tends to happen is it starts to dry very quickly, right? And because you're putting a thin coat on, if you put a thick coat on, and it's really gonna make your job harder. So try to master the mud in its thin form. This is it's very important, let's say. Yeah, my pump is in the back right there. It's the same pumping process. There's nothing different. The pump is amazing. It will handle thick or thin mud. And like I said, I highly recommend the machine. The machine I'm only using is just for the flats, as you can see. The butt joints, I'm not touching. Mind you, there's a way to do butt joints and there's a way to do corner beads. There's a way to use the box to do a lot of the work. But in this scenario, I'm just using it for the flats. Everything else after this will be done by hand. And that, I'll get into that a bit later. But let's just say the results are better. Even in this case, running the 12-inch box gives you a good result for the factory edge. But there is some technique when you're going to use it for the corner bead. There is some technique when you're going to use it for the butt joints. So if you're going to cheat anywhere, let's say, or if you're going to make the job easier anywhere, run it across the flats. The results will be amazing. And then as far as, say, for example, your butt joints are concerned, use your hand to do it. Just for the sake of results, until you've gotten better at using the machine and you feel comfortable. Say, for example, doing the corner beads, or saying, for example, doing the butt joints with the machine. And I guess that's just about it. I mean, thinking about it, it kind of wraps it up. All you're really trying to do here is leave a thin layer of mud on the wall in all its form. Now today I'm only going to go through the machine and why I'm using the machine, but the nail heads get the exact same treatment. The butt joints get the exact same treatment. You are going over the entire job at this stage of the job. And, the main thing here is to be absolutely clean. Get a thin layer of mud into all those air pockets, all those little misplaced. Your mud should already be at level already. Your wall should be flat already. It should almost look like it's ready to paint, but it's not ready because all those imperfections that's in there, that when the light comes in, or when the light is in a spot, or when the painter paints the wall, that's what you're fixing right now. All these little details, that's what you're fixing right now. And for that, you must go over the entire house. Like, again, I like to do things in steps. I do all the flats first, then I'll do all the butt joints, then I'll do all the three-way. And the point in that is because I'm doing so much of the house. The point in that is that, well, I know I just did all the butt joints. I know I did all the flats, versus I go into a room. I do, some guys like to do one room at a time. I like to do one thing at a time, you know. So if I come back in here again, I'll do all the butt joints, and if it's worth it, I'll do all the nail head, and if it's worth it, I'll do all the three ways. But I never do, like, I just do one process at a time. I do all the nail heads at the end, as an example. But for today, that's it. It's skim coat. It's after your rough sand. Your rough sand should be nice and confident. And the idea here is to keep your mud clean. Tips of the day: keep your mud clean, keep your mud soft. If you can, keep your mud covered. It'll keep a good consistency right to the very end. If you keep your mud covered, for example, things to look out for: clean your edges, clean everything, and don't be afraid to make your mud a bit thicker if it's falling out. Don't be afraid to make your mud thinner if it's not working out for you. That's really the mark of your mud, is how you feel comfortable working with it. There's no rules that says it has to be XYZ, or it has to be 2 containers or 2 liters added. It really is all about how you're going to work with that material. But you're seeing the machine in work here. I like to keep my edges clean. It is the last layer. These are your biggest problems: getting your edges clean, getting any off edges clean. It has to be your cleanest, because if you don't do it this way, you're going to end up sanding quite a bit with your 150 sandpaper, and that's a lot of work with that fine grit, right? You should think of the final sand as a buff. It's a buff. I'm just buffing the walls, right? And there should not be any heavy edges at this stage of the job. In any case, there's more to follow. Today is just a 12-inch box, like I said before. I will explain more about the butt joints, the core, the inside, all these little details. I'll explain more. But for today, it's just a box. And the reason for the box, I'm going very fast. It takes out a big chunk of the work. Anyways, have a good day. Take it easy and keep on taping.